To remove the bearing, support the bearing assembly on a shop press using a bearing splitter. To protect the driveshaft splines, place a press adapter between the press ram and driveshaft stub. Use your hands to maintain control of the shaft as you press off the bearing and bearing retainer. When clamping a driveshaft in a vise, only clamp on the weld bead. In most cases, you should not remove the inner slinger unless the correct new inner slinger is included with the bearing. If you are sure you have the exact replacement inner slinger, you can unseat the slinger to provide more clearance for the bearing splitter. Here we are pressing off a splicer type bearing assembly. Clean the stub shaft to remove all dirt and old grease. A shaft that does not have a U-joint in the tube yoke can be supported on the edge of a thick press block. Use suitably sized steel plates to support a shaft that has an installed U-joint in the tube yoke. To install a new inner slinger, place the slinger on the stub and use a suitable press tube to seat it on the stub. To install the bearing, first slide the bearing over the shaft stub until it stops. Then place the end of the QT4003 installer against the bearing. Press the bearing on until it seats. Your center bearing is now installed. Rotate the bearing support to verify the bearing spins freely. The installation procedures are the same for all 40mm ID center bearing assemblies. Here we are installing a splicer type bearing used on many 1980s and 1990s Dodge and Ford applications. Again, check to make sure the bearing rotates freely after it is pressed on. Most bearings are supplied with a retainer that gets installed against the bearing. Sometimes you can press the retainer on with the QT4003 installer. However, most retainers like this AAM one require using our optional QT4004 retainer adapter along with the QT4003 installer. It does not take much force to install a retainer. Carefully press it on until it seats against the bearing. QT4003 installer makes your driveshaft carrier bearing replacement job easy. Tool features include over 10.5 inches of inside clearance for long splined midship stub shafts, reduced tip outside diameter to fit inside bearing shields, inside clearance for all 40mm driveshaft bearing applications, solid steel welded cap. Optional QT4004 driveshaft carrier bearing retainer tool slips over the end of QT4003 installer. Shop the easy way with our free application-specific interactive exploded views with index, component introduction, exploded views, recommended manuals, videos, torque specs, tools, kits, parts, and more on TorqueKing.com.